Hey everybody, welcome back to James Draws Everything. This is James, continuing today with drawing every country in the world's flag, and we're getting one step closer to finishing off the Balkans today, because we're going to be doing the country of Serbia. And this one, it's got a very, very long, rich history, and one of those cool kind of old school European flags with the coat of arms. So I'm just gonna start laying down some stuff right here and we'll get right into it. Okay. So, Serbia, ancient Romans, Byzantines, early Slavic migrations into the region kind of bring up the modern Serbian identity. So kind of early Slavic tribes settling in there. Christianization of Serbia kind of happened around the middle of the 9th century. And they did have some issues with the Byzantine Empire kind of early on. And this led to a kingdom of Serbia in 1217. And then an empire in 1336 under Stefan Dusan, and he is kind of like a hero in the Serbian Orthodox Church. So just very kind of broad strokes here. Serbia tends to be Orthodox Christian, which at sometimes has put it against its Croatian neighbors there, who tend to be more Catholic. But again, it's very, very kind of broad strokes. It does get very complicated, of course, because this is the Balkans, and it's always complicated here. And the fact that they're Orthodox as well has always kind of made them pretty friendly towards the Russians. So this place has always sort of been seen as kind of like the little brother of Russia. And then you have some pretty important things that happen that are kind of still etched into the Serbian national identity, like the Battle of Kosovo in 1389 against the rising Ottoman Empire. But by the end of the 14th century, the Ottoman Turks had conquered and kind of overtaken a lot of this territory. So this is sort of where you see the rise of Islam in the Balkans, which does kind of create some issues, right up until the modern day. Okay, let's just start with our colors here. We got one of them pan-Slavic colored flags. So this one does look a lot like some of its neighbors, right? It's got that kind of red, white, blue traditional Slavic color in it. Give me 1 second here. Yeah, with Serbia, this is kind of one of those places where, and I think as we kind of go through the history, we can kind of just count the grievances, right? Because this is one of those places where there's a lot of old wounds that still kind of resurface to this day. Okay, 1 second. So yeah, with the Ottomans ruling this area, Serbia, they do lose a lot of their own autonomy, right? So that does put them at odds with a lot of the Islamic faith that are in that region. So that kind of kind of sort of settles down into what's like Albania today, and some parts of like Bosnia and Herzegovina. But again, it's kind of oversimplifying things quite a bit, which you sort of have to do when you're going through this region. And something else to mention, right, as this is going on, we're seeing the rise of the Habsburg Empire, right? And we did talk about them in depth when I did my Austria episode, so go check out that. And this led to a Habsburg-Ottoman War in the late 17th century. So Serbia, as a result of that war, they came out from under Ottoman rule and then just kind of transitioned right into Habsburg rule, right? So there's a grievance, right? Because not everybody in Serbia was down for that, right? They were ready to get rid of their Ottoman oppressors, but they still wanted home rule, or they wanted to have their own sovereignty, basically. So there was a lot of massacres during this time by Albanian and Tartars, and a lot of Serbs ended up kind of fleeing the country in basically to go what is now Hungary. And that was the Great Migration of 1690. And this kind of led to, some petitioning towards the government. And Emperor Leopold formally granted the Serbs a set of privileges, right? So giving them freedom of religion and a little bit more self-governance. Okay, let's start with our reds here. So then in the 18th century, early 18th century, a kingdom of Serbia is established. Okay, so they are still kind of under the Habsburg thumb a little bit. But it doesn't last too long, because the Ottomans, they come back for a rematch, and then in 1739 they retake this region, and then it kind of bounces back and forth a little bit. It does go back to the Habsburgs, like some of the central portions of Serbia, and this place, maybe it's kind of getting tired of getting booted around back and forth. So there is another Serbian revolution for independence in the early 1800s. And then there's like another one, so it's not really just one thing. There's actually two of them in kind of the early part of the century. Which eventually leads to a compromise between Serbian leaders and the Ottoman authorities. And you start seeing a lot of Serbian sort of nationalist movements during this time, right? And then also this time in just world history, you're seeing a lot of kind of anti-monarchical movements. Republicanism is kind of spreading. So there's more as your kind of your kings and your feudal lords and all that sort of become weakened. Industrialization becomes a big thing. There's a lot more of all that power to the people stuff kind of spreading throughout Europe. So this leads to Serbia actually being one of the first countries in Europe to abolish feudalism. Right, so more of that power of the people stuff also leads to a growing Serbian nationalist movement, right? So these people have been sort of bounced back and forth between greater powers for quite some time. They said, enough of that. We want to have our own Serbia. So this is definitely, it's really like a youth movement too, right? So this is, this is kind of like a new idea, not just for Serbia, but for, all of Europe. And this leads to them developing their own constitution in 1835. So that's actually February 15th, 1835. That's Statehood Day in Serbia. It is a national holiday. And then you do also have kind of some more clashes coming up with Ottoman armies and Serbs in the 1860s. And then finally, that kind of leads to the last Turkish soldiers leaving what is now Serbia, so kind of de facto gains independence. Then they go through another constitutional reform, and they go to war with the Ottomans again, and sort of, at the end of the, the 19th century here, the Ottoman Empire definitely on its last legs, right? They're in a pretty rough state of decline. And a lot of this is sort of egged on by Britain and some other European powers. I've talked about this a little bit in other episodes, but when they see their fellow Christian peoples revolting against what is viewed as their cruel Ottoman masters, this is kind of this is like what old school sort of liberalism is, right? Like we have to defend our Christian brothers, and wish that they gain independence from their overlords and are free to practice their religion and all that stuff. So it was kind of seen as like a religious conflict in some ways. You also have a little bit more of there's more to it than just that, right? There's a lot of foreign interest in the Balkans, definitely with like Russia, because them Russians having allies in that area, it's gonna ease the ability for Russians to trade, right? Because Russia, notoriously, they don't really have warm water ports, so the Greeks kind of play into this as well, right? Because the Greeks have a long-standing rivalry with the Ottoman Turks, so they're always kind of willing to gain allies, against them. Yeah, this flag also has, of course, one of my favorite things to draw. It's got the two-headed burb. Does have a really cool coat of arms on it, which I dig. And then around that time, you also have the Russo-Turkish War, right? So Russia and the Ottoman Empire, which sort of leads to a little bit of a tricky piece here, where Austria-Hungary they end up getting control of Bosnia and Herzegovina, right? So that was maybe not part of the plan, according to a lot of these people. So that's a grievance. You can throw another grievance on your bingo card there. And so Austria-Hungary is I guess basically occupying Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Serbia is, I guess, sort of left alone, right? They're a principality during this point, but there is a lot of growing, nationalism in that area. So, mainly with like the Bosnia question, or the Bosnia issue, whatever you want to call it. Bosnia is not happy with or Bosnia and Herzegovina, not happy with being under Austrian Habsburg rule, right? They also want independence. So right on the eve of World War I, there is another Balkan War, right? There's pretty much nonstop towards late 19th, early 20th century, which leads to Serbia expanding a little bit until it's now Kosovo, and it kind of leaves Bulgaria out in the cold. So Bulgaria, they're kind of moved more towards the Ottomans as far as who they ally with. Because you got a lot of different powers kind of making moves in this region. So there is a lot of tension, and of course, leading into 1914, that tension does sort of finally reach a boiling point, right? So you have a Bosnian Serb, right, Gavrilo Princip, who assassinates the Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and that kicks off World War I, right? Because Austria-Hungary basically it's called the blank check, right? So they sort of give Serbia like an ultimatum to where it will be like impossible for them to not go to war. And this does anger Russia, right? Because Russia, who was also allied with France, which is kind of uncharacteristic based on their history with each other, right? With the Napoleonic Wars and stuff, that was sort of just kind of throwing a match onto the pool of gasoline that was Europe at that point. And yeah, so all these great powers finally just comes to a head, and World War I pops off, and the rest is history there. All right, so the Serbians did suffer a lot of casualties during that time period. In the aftermath of World War I, right, all of the great empires of Europe are no longer, right? So it's all new. It's all republicanism, nation states, and this leads to the formation of Yugoslavia, right? So a united Slavic state, and of course that did not work either. So there was tensions pretty much right off the bat from that. You had a lot of internal wars in Yugoslavia, right, over people who were felt they weren't being represented. The Serbians did actually have quite a significant role in Yugoslav politics, right? They just kind of tended to be, could be for a number of reasons, right? They had a sort of a functioning state for a lot longer than most of their Yugoslav brothers. But either way, this kind of finally leads to a guy named Tito. Right, we talked about Tito in a couple other episodes, so I won't get too in detail. But he was the dictator who kept it together, right? So Tito, he was a communist, right? So you have a lot of communists fighting with the Chetniks. So the communist partisans versus the Chetniks, kind of in the background of World War II. Again, Tito was communist, but this also becomes tricky because he had a break with Stalin, right? So Yugoslavia was a very, very sort of unique outlier in the Cold War because they were kind of allowed to do their own thing outside of the Soviet orbit, right? Which kind of drove Stalin nuts because he was Serbia especially was always supposed to be loyal to Russia or the Soviet Union, whatever you want to think of them as. So that goes for a couple decades. Tito does pass away in 1980, and that kind of results in things really unraveling in Yugoslavia. And then with the fall of communism, Yugoslavia falls apart as well, and that leads to a lot of violence. At the end of the 20th century, like, I guess you could say it was the most violence since World War II, on the European continent. You do have a lot of uprisings with, like, Albanians against the Serbs, and the Serbs under Milosevic, they kind of put them down, and it's kind of like a modern, where you really start hearing the term ethnic cleansing, right? It kind of refers to that. So Milosevic is kind of bad guy number one, in the 1990s. And that sort of leads to another issue with Kosovo, right? Because Kosovo is mostly full of, like, ethnic Albanians, right? And then so they have a big issue with being part of Serbia. Serbia and Montenegro, right? They still try to keep Yugoslavia together, but just as Serbia and Montenegro for a period of time. And Montenegro does separate from Serbia, become an independent state in 2006. Then in 2008, Kosovo kind of becomes an independent state, but that's not really internationally recognized. Serbia does not recognize it. They still recognize Kosovo as part of Serbia. So yeah, there's a lot of problems when Yugoslavia fell apart, but things have mostly kind of cooled off until today, right? So Serbia has made moves to sort of join, like, the larger European communities. So hopefully, that stuff is in the past. And yeah, so it's a real interesting place, and I'm sure I left quite a bit out, but you know what? Again, there's only so much I can do. So yeah, it's a country with a lot of, you think of them as just Serbians, just Orthodox Christians, but a lot of that stuff bleeds into other borders, and they've been kind of passed back and forth between so many greater powers. It's just one of those kind of recipes for disaster, right? It's always going to cause issues. But with that said, again, we wish the Serbs nothing but the best. And what does that flag mean? Well, you got the Pan-Slavic colors, right? You got that red, blue, and white. So that goes back to the 19th century Russian flag. The colors don't really have any official meaning, but you'll see them a lot kind of on my project here, right? It always means Pan-Slavic. And that two-headed bird with the crown in the middle, that is the Serbian coat of arms, right? So it's a two-headed eagle on a red shield, and it's got like a smaller red shield. Represents the Serbian nation, kind of divided into four quarters. I know it's sort of hard to tell at this scale. It's got a white cross and a royal crown on top of the coat of arms. So, a lot of the crosses, kind of factored into that design. Again, Serbia, Orthodox Christian, so, the cross is going to play an important role in their iconography. So, that is Serbia, and that is its flag. And let me know what you think. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you on the next episode.